Hey everybody, it's Ryan Haggerty from Pi Records, and I'm excited to have Bob Berryhill of the Surfaris with me. How are you, Bob?
Oh, I'm doing great, thanks. Doing really well.
It's so excellent to have you because as everybody who knows the song Wipeout knows
Yeah.
you, knows the band, very exciting. Um like what you were 15 when that song came out, is that correct?
Yes, I had been playing basically semi-professionally at 13. And then when we started the Safaris in basically September of 1962, Jim Fuller, Pat Conley, and I were all 15-year-olds, and Ron Wilson was the old man. He was 17.
So what's
Yeah.
that feel like when you're at that age where you're it's your formative years, and your record gets played on the radio and you're like your mind is like must be racing.
Oh yeah, it was at the age of 13, I went to Hawaii and was at the Kaiser Hawaiian Village, and I was out at a hula show, and I was 13 in the audience, and I looked up at the hula band and the guy coming out with his fancy ukulele playing. I said, Dad, I want to do that. So it actually started for me when I was about 13. So had already been playing. I had been taking music lessons and learning to read music and charts. And my music teacher was taking me around to different bands, like Norm Thurber and the Odysseys and the Tornadoes, bands that were local to the sort of San Bernardino, LA County area. And so I was kind of getting primed going, wow, I really want this to happen, but had no idea it was going to happen 2 years later.
Yeah,
It's one of those things where you're just, it's sort of like a domino. Everything happened for a reason, and it had to happen the way it did, or it wouldn't have happened, that
yeah,
kind of thing. So it was exciting. Oh yeah, it was exciting, mind blowing, because I'm only a sophomore in high school when all
yeah.
this takes place. And here I am at a sophomore driving a brand new car. I just got my driver's license in June of 63. So when I recorded Wipeout, all I had was a learner's permit. So, I mean, it was kind of like everything was happening so quickly. You're at 15 and you're on tour with people that are 19, 20, 24 years old. So
Yeah.
you're culturally, you're looking up to all your idols. I mean, we went on tour with Roy Orbison, I
Wow.
mean, that was an icon of mine when I was a child, because my sister had all of his records and I would listen to them and loved his records. And, to be just in that world suddenly, it's a shock to your formative years, cause you to
Yeah,
grow up real fast.
yeah, especially on tour, right?
Oh my gosh. I mean, you're around roadies for the first time, and producers, directors, other, the Beach Boys, hanging out with people who are already going, and you're just like, you got to hit records. So you're suddenly considered a professional musician at 16. You're
Yeah,
suddenly in that environment. So it requires a lot of composure. And thanks to my mother, she was very good counsel and very grounded. So she would help me tremendously. And so did my dad. Kept me on a straight course,
yeah,
with protection. I mean,
yeah,
you're suddenly thrown into wolves pack,
yeah.
and everybody's out there asking you, how do you make money in this business? Well, you have a hit record. That's how it works. But there's a lot of guys that hit records who didn't make any money. So,
Yeah.
it was a process. And again, all that had to happen as well.
That's one thing I think, as you see these young stars today, that they have trouble with is they don't have the support of their parents in a mindful way. And that's really it's really encouraging for me to hear that you had the support of your parents for you to follow your passion.
Oh yeah, because I told them, my mom and dad, I wanted to be, wanted to be on late 50s. When I was at 8 or 10 years old, my mom and dad would take us to the town hall party, which was in Culver City. And all the stars from the Grand Ole Opry would come out to Culver City and do a Saturday night, Sunday show. And they would take me to that. And I'd look up and go, Lefty Frizzell and Speedy West and, all the Joe Maphis. they're playing Hot Rod Lincoln, and I'm just getting jazz. So
Yeah.
they were very supportive. And I mean, my parents loved music. They would take us to what we called Western music in those days, called
Yeah.
country today. Of course, it's
Yeah.
the cool thing. And so I got to watch how to be on stage, and got to talk to some of the artists behind stage to kind of see how they purported themselves. And my parents were right there with me. So it was good.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So cool to see family supporting each other. And I think that's very important. And
Yeah.
one of the things about family that I wanted to mention to you before I forget is I interviewed your son, Devin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. He's a chip off the old block, as we say.
oh my God, he's so cool. And
Yeah.
when I reached out to you, I then reached out to him. I said, "Is Bob Berryhill your dad?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "I'm interviewing him." I said, "I didn't know he was your dad." He's like, "Oh yes, he's got a wonderful story. Your son's a really great guy, and I love his band."
Yeah. He's got the Tourmalines band, and he's playing in Southern California. He's coming out March 5th here in Nashville. We're gonna play a concert at the 5 spot in Nashville with Eddie Angel
Yeah, I
of
saw
Los
that.
Straitjackets.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we're looking forward to that show. We're getting all prepped and pumped to play that, to play instrumental surf music for Nashville.
that's
They probably
awesome.
have never heard it, not unless they've heard Dick Dale, who was inducted in 2017 at the Musicians Hall of Fame.
Yeah,
And then we were inducted in 2019. So, a little music, but our band, the Surfaris, the way I run the band, it's really what 1963 sounded like. I don't try to make it progressive surf music or make it contemporary. I do the hits from the 60s that fit, like Pipeline, obviously Wipeout,
yeah,
Surfer Joe, the songs and play them the way I played them in 63. So
yeah,
it's like if you hear a 40 sounded like, well, you hear our band with Devin and Joel and my wife as a bass player, we play what 1963 sounded like. So it's very authentic that way.
and are you lucky enough to have the gear from the 60s?
Well, I have all reissue things. My old thing, my reverb unit, we did Wipeout. I donated that to the Musicians Hall of Fame. So that's sitting on display there. And it was getting rather tired. Reverb units, those little boxes, they rattle around and go nuts on you. And so I decided to retire that in a good place, archived. And then I bought a Fender Reverb Tank reissue. And I have 2 of those. And I have a 65 dual Showman with the JBL speakers in it. I have a 69 dual Showman with JBLs in it. So I've got those 2 when we can bring them along because they're heavy as heck.
Yeah.
So you can't show up with that stuff. But I think here in Nashville, I'm going to break out my my Showman for this show. I've got one here. My son has the other one in California. So we will have some authentic speakers for that show.
You can't beat Fender for amps. There's just something about them.
Yeah. Well, if you look at all of the early Beatles things, you'll see Fender Showmans in the background. It was, and still today, you'll see Fender Showman amps, even the old ones. Mine's a 65 and I have a 69. They're all rebuilt. Mine are all in fact, I had Billy Zoom rebuild mine, and he it's got 6L6 tubes in it, and he's got springs on them that hold the tubes up. So I've had it zoomed, as we say. So we've had them all rebuilt because the electronics from the 60s they get tired, and so you have to resolder and put new resistors, new capacitors to the same spec, but you've got to upgrade it because the temperatures and the jostling around it just cracks, and you can't have that on stage breaking up. So they're all sort of been zoomed, and they're ready to go for the heat, as we say.
Yeah, totally. I had a Fender Bassman. I'm a guitar player, but I played through a Bassman, and boy, that thing was beautiful. It was beautiful, and
for a guitar, that's a great amp.
Yeah, I think it was a late 60s model. My cousin played it. But what I want to ask you about is one thing is
Oh,
You
you're
you started
oh, the
with
screen's
a
locking
song.
up a little bit.
Oh, are you okay?
I'm sorry. Say it again. Yeah,
Oh,
the screen is locking up.
oh,
Try it
okay.
again.
Um,
Try it again.
you started out with Switchblade. Tell me about that.
Well, it's a case where, again, a domino theory. One thing led to another, led to another, led to another for Wipeout. The Switchblade thing is one of those dominoes. Okay, what happened is that after we recorded Wipeout, that was the third take. They said, okay, what are you going to call it? Well, Jim Fuller had been to Tijuana the weekend before, and he pulls out of his pocket a switchblade. He clicks it on the microphone that Ronnie had just sang Surfer Joe on, goes
Yeah,
click, switchblade. Okay, well, what that meant was the click was anemic. Any sound guy is going to go, hey, we need a bigger click. Well, my
yeah,
dad takes the cue, goes out into the back alley, grabs an old cement soaked piece of plywood, brings that in. Pat Conley breaks that on the microphone, and it sounds like a busting surfboard now.
yeah.
So what happens is you go, that sounds like a busting surfboard. But I said, there's one problem, guys. There's already a song called Bustin' Surfboards. So we couldn't use that title. And we got to thinking, well, how do you bust a surfboard? You wipe out, just like that.
Nice,
Then
nice.
Dale Smallin, our original manager, in the control room, here's the crack. Here's us talking about wiping out. He comes out of the studio sound room, comes to the microphone, the same microphone that Ronnie sang Surfer Joe on, and goes, ha, 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 wipe out. Just like
Nice.
that, without any rehearsal, without any talking about it. He just did it. And I said, well, thanks, Dale. He says, I says, wow, that's great. And he said, yeah, I'm giving that to you guys as his contribution.
Yeah,
So that's how Wipeout got named Wipeout. And then, so what happened was we had the song, we had the crack, we had the laugh, and then Paul Buff, who was a great engineer, basically the father of surf music recording in California, out in Cucamonga, which is where we recorded Wipeout. He put it together on a 1/4-inch reel-to-reel monaural, right? And then he cuts a lathe. He has a lathe that he made on his own with a vacuum sweeper pulling the chips off. He makes a master of it, and they start trying to shop it around. And so we shopped it to Art LeBeau, who was a huge oldies but goodies guy, and he
yeah.
passed on it. He didn't like it. But that's how kind of it got started in the process.
So like the 50s, like Elvis, he had a lathe and they cut the record right from the track.
Exactly. It was a 1/4-inch reel-to-reel, probably 7.5 hips, nothing
Yeah,
fancy. He had his own tape recorder, and it was basically 2 tracks mixed down to monaural on a lathe. He cut it, and that was the master
that's
of Wipeout.
awesome.
Yeah.
Would that be in the Musicians Hall of Fame as well?
No, those things are gone. Never got,
Yeah.
we weren't smart enough to know that 60 years later, people would care about it.
I
But no,
guess.
none of that. The original tape was destroyed in a fire in 2008 at the Universal Studios vault. Remember that caught on fire?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
Wipeout, Louie, a lot of the old doo-wop things are all burned up. So,
yeah.
and I don't know, but I believe all of our Decca footage where we have 5 albums, that was also destroyed. So I'm
Ah,
not sure if any of that is available today, but it has been digified. Everything got digitally remastered
yeah.
before the fire,
Oh,
fortunately.
good, 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 good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, what was it like for you uh during your induction into the Musicians Hall of Fame? Like, what was that experience for for you the day that was going on?
Well, it was definitely magical. It's a case where you as a musician, like when you have your hit record and suddenly your friends are hearing it on their radio, their AM radio in their car, and they come in your driveway with a convertible top down with the AM radio blasting up, telling you, we're really happy that you have a hit record. We love your group. We want to hear you play. So that kind of a thing, excuse me, that's kind of the feeling that the Musicians Hall of Fame was. Joe Chambers, who's the director of there, created a category for great instrumental songs, the most influential instrumental song category. And so he chose Wipeout as the most influential song to begin that whole process. Now, there's obviously hundreds of great instrumental songs, but Wipeout just happens to be one that he knew me, and we've been talking for about 10 years to kind of get this thing going. And he thought it would be great to get it into that category. But the night we recorded, imagine you show up at a place that there's TV cameras, there's recording gear, there's stage managers, there's roadies. Suddenly there's somebody there to tune your guitar for you. I mean, first class treatment. I mean, we never had that in the original band. I mean, if somebody broke a string, I had to take the guitar off stage, put a new string on it, give it back to Fuller so he could continue playing. I mean, that's how we did it in those days. We never had roadies. We did have a couple of managers, but it wasn't like that. But anyway, so here we arrive. Joe puts us up in the Westin Hotel, which is a first class hotel here in Nashville. So we're getting changed and dressed and getting our uniforms on, because the Surfaris always wore a uniform. We got our uniforms on, and we drove up to the place, to the Segerstrom Hall of Concert Hall. And we walk up, and immediately we're up with a bunch of ladies. Say, okay, sign right here. We're going to put this on YouTube. You need to get paid. So here's your papers to sign. I mean, just starting out, just getting you ready to go, So we cruise around through that, go around backstage, and we have this beautiful green room that has this big poster on a big table in the middle of the room. And they hand us pens and say, okay, everybody sign this. Well, we're signing it. And suddenly Brenda Lee walks in.
Wow.
One of my idols from early days.
Yeah.
And, everybody that came through the show had to come in there. So I got to meet everybody who was on the show, just all these country stars and and so that was awesome. Got to meet the guys in the Muscle Shoals, like the Wrecking Crew guys, because that's what this museum is all about. It's all about the guys who played on every record, Hank Garland kind of guys, that you hear their guitar, but then they had to sign a waiver saying they wouldn't collect any royalties for doing that.
Oh.
So, they just got paid the hourly gig, $300 for the night or whatever. So all these guys were there. So it was magical in that way. So we got to do that. Vinny, who sang a lot of hit songs, was there. The other people, but anyway, so then you're in this room, right? You got your uniform on, and suddenly comes in and says, okay, boys, 5 minutes. They're telling you you're going to go on stage, 5 minutes. I go, what? So where's my guitar? Oh, Herb has it. He's your guitar tech. When you walk on stage, he'll hand it to you and it'll be all tuned. First class treatment, it was awesome. But anyway, we did the rehearsal. To go back one little bit, we had a rehearsal in the studio first. And when they heard Wipeout come on, everybody stopped what they were doing because they have never heard it live by the guy who originally played it, and they all stopped and just stared for the 2.5 minutes that we were playing it. And when we're done, it was just, a big round of applause. Like, wow, that was so, they'd never seen that. A surf band basically in Nashville. And these are all country guys that could, play circles around me, but they were hearing one song that they idolized,
Yeah.
So anyway, we got to do that. And then we went out and then we talked to a few more stars that came through. Paul Schaefer was the MC for the thing. And he was on his organ playing. Yeah. And he came in and signed autographs and got to meet him. That was so cool. And then Bob Taylor, the guy who built Taylor guitars, was getting inducted the same night. And so I got to sit right next to him, and we all sat on the stage with all the people being inducted, which was awesome. So we had like right there at the seats and to see the show, and it was just wonderful. And then when they called our name and said, okay, we're going to have the Surfaris come up, I got up from there, and then Herb gave me my guitar and walked out on stage and plugged into the amp, and they had the Wipeout laugh go on, and done for you. You don't have to do it yourself. You wouldn't want to trouble yourself. And they just punch the button, and the laugh comes on. And my son Joel plays drums, so they got the camera on him. He's playing Wipeout roll, and then my wife comes in with the bass line, and my son and I come in, and I'm playing lead guitar. My son's Devin is playing rhythm, and so I'm playing lead guitar on it, and it was just magic. And then in the middle of the song, they throw all these beach balls out onto the stage and onto the crowd. So they're bounding around with beach balls, and we're walking up and kicking them back and play. And we played the song, and it came off great. And then we went over to the side, and they asked me a few questions. And they also had a video of me with Joe Chambers doing an off-camera interview that they played prior to us playing. And it was so interesting as they were standing on the stage while they're playing the video, and the crowd is laughing at my jokes. I'm going, what are they laughing at? I'm doing this interview with him, and it was just it was such a great feeling. Here's 3,000 people all laughing at your jokes. I'm going, wow, this is unbelievable. So we're up there and we play the song, and then we go off, and then backstage, and then everybody went on. About 3 or 4 different acts. Paul played with the Young Rascals, playing organ with the guy. He was there, and got to watch all the acts. It was a magical night. And it's kind of like the epitome. It's like getting a Golden Globe or getting an Oscar in the music business, to be given that much of a accolade for a contribution you made to a musical endeavor. So happy about it. Joe Chambers, best guy. Jay McDowell was there. He's their assistant director, I believe. He's great. And then all the people, even the ladies that do all the backstage work and push you around, get you where you need to be. They even gave us tickets the next week to see the Country Music Awards. Gave us authorization to go. So my wife and I went and saw the Country Music Awards with Reba McEntire and all some of the female stars that were there. It was just an awesome week of just enjoying the fruits of your labor, you might say.
Recognition by your peers.
Exactly. And that's what the Musicians Hall of Fame is. It's your peers who vote you in. You don't get in unless they vote you in. So I thought that was awesome.
It must be surreal. You hear it so many times. But I'm sure for you, when you were there that night, you're like, how did it get here? Right. It's like, how did I get here? I mean, like that thing you do, that movie that came out, the Surfaris are basically that movie, because we're from Glendora. I mean, how many people have heard of that town? Unless the people who live there. And to have it, I mean, it's a small town. I mean, my dad had a construction company in town, and my wife's, who was my girlfriend at that time, had a furniture store in Monrovia. So it was like local business people all coming together. So it was a great time to be starting out, you might say. So when did you and your wife? I myself, my business with my wife is with my wife.
Right.
This Pie Records is with my wife. When did you decide to team up with your wife, and how did that feel for you when you first guys got together and jammed?
Well, that was what happened is that obviously the Surfaris will be 60 years old, and 63 and 23. So 3 of the guys have passed away. So as those guys have passed away, I've replaced them with other people. And in 1990, what happened is my wife and I went to Europe on a tour, and it was her and I. She played bass, I had my guitar. We were with a troupe of 11 people from all over the world, and we played a tour for about 6 weeks in Europe. And we'd go up and play Wipeout. And so that was in about 1989, 1990. So we started playing. And so when we came back, we said, hey, why don't we go ahead and play, as the Surfaris with you and I on bass, and we'll put 2 other people. We needed another drummer and a guitar player. So we had other people come in. And so my wife, to go back to my wife's story, my wife is a concert violinist. Okay, she did violin since she was like 5 or 6 years old. So she was really good. And she's also a great harmony background singer, lead singer. She's written her own songs. She's quite accomplished as a musician. And so when she came back, she says, you know what? I'm going to put that aside and I'm going to play in your band. So we
Wow.
started that in 1990 and we started, the Surfaris .com website. We started putting out our own records. We came in 2005. We recorded, the CD remake of
Yeah,
Wipeout.
that's a re-recording.
Yeah, this is a re-recording of Wipeout.
Yep.
Of course, the original was, on a big LP, of course. The original with the original. This is the original album cover with the 5 of us on the back.
Oh,
And so,
man.
so what I did is in 1990, I needed a stereo version. Now, I don't know if you know the story of this album, but this album has Wipeout and Surfer Joe by the 5 of us, by the 4 of us. The 5th Beatle on here is Jim Pash, who was a sax player, right? Well, there's no saxophone on Wipeout or Surfer Joe. So what happened is that our original publisher decided that he didn't want to work with us. So he recorded the album, that Wipeout album, all the other songs in April of 63, and then told us to go out to the studio in June of 63 to record all of those songs. So there's a missing reel of all the songs, all these songs that are on here. There's a missing reel with all of these songs, not including Wipeout and Surfer Joe, but all of these other songs like Yep and Wiggle Wobble and Teen Beat and these other things. And that we recorded that in the first week of June on a Saturday. Well, the next week, the album came out.
How did they do
And we kind of thought, well, that's pretty fast. Yeah, that's pretty fast in 1963 for something to go to New York, be pressed, photographed, colorized, brought back here, and in our hands a week later. And what happened is our manager brought us the copy of the record. We put it on my stereo at my mom's house, put the needle on it, started playing a song, and we go, well, Wipeout and Surfer Joe is us, but who's this other band? That doesn't sound, Ronnie goes, that doesn't sound like my drumming. And the rest of it go, well, that doesn't sound like us either. And we turned to our manager, who we trusted, Dale Smallin, and said, Dale, what happened? Well, they overdubbed you a little bit because you're not in the union.
Oh.
And what's so amazing is that all these years later, I interviewed Paul Buff, who was the original recorder of Wipeout and Surfer Joe. And because we'd gone out to PAL Records again to record all those songs, which were never used, 50 years later, when Wipeout was 50 years old, I came to Nashville and talked to Paul Buff, interviewed him. That's the first time I'd talked to him since we recorded Wipeout in 1962. I never talked to him again. And so his first question to me was, what's with the saxophone? Because he'd heard the album and heard all this sax. And he says, you guys didn't have a saxophone when you recorded Wipeout. I said, that is true. And he says, also, that doesn't sound much like you guys. I said, exactly. And so what happened is that our manager was in cahoots with Richard Delvey, who was the drummer for the Challengers, right? He had his own recording studio, and he had all his buddies from a wrecking crew that he had record all those songs. And so we ended up taking them all to court. And that's the only reason we got any money out of it, because we sued everybody, got thrown off a dot, and then we signed with Decca, and then we did the 5 albums on Decca.
But those guys, they don't earn any royalties off that playing, do they?
Well, we had all those contracts null and void because he had signed the players that played on that album as the Surfaris.
Ooh.
I mean, it was really bad. I have a contract that shows all the names of all the guys who Richard Delvey signed up with Dot Records as the Surfaris, who then were going to get paid, and we were not, because we weren't on the album except for Wipeout and Surfer Joe. So it was, one of those things, again, another domino. He had to do that in order for us to get our rights. In other words, we had signed these stupid contracts at 15 years old or 16, because they were signed in March of 63. We were 16 at that point. And so that would have meant that we would have got 0.0002 cents a copy, that kind of stuff. And it would have been all them and none of us. But was so great is that they got sued by our parents because that was fraud, because
Yeah.
Jim Pash's picture was on the back. And his dad said that was fraud. So Jim got $5,000 up front to pay to get paid, and got his picture taken off. So all the subsequent albums had his picture taken off, and then no picture, because we told him to stop printing the album because it was fraud. But nobody
Yeah.
to this day cares if it is or not, because it's a great album, great title, great. That's why I used the whole thing again, because this sells the song and the
Yeah.
wave, and this thing sells like hotcakes. I get tons of downloads of this master, and I've even had people from Canada who want to use it on commercials because they love my version of it over the original version, which is hard to do,
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
song like that. And so we did that, and then we went to the studio in 2015 and did what is called Hurley Sessions, which
Ah,
we did as a this is what we play on stage. This is what the Surfaris sounds like today, because what we did is we went to Hurley. Hurley makes clothes, right?
yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so they have a sound studio with a nice Neve board in it, and I came down there to do a promo because Fender Guitar and Hobie wanted to put a Fender guitar together and a surfboard together as a package and raise money for charity to make fresh water in Africa. So anyway, I went
Okay.
down there, did the interview, and while I'm sitting around looking, I'm going to the vice president of Hurley. I'm going, hey, there's a recording studio right there. Can I bring my band down to your place and just plug in? You don't do anything but have an engineer put it on the Pro Tools and just let it go, and we'll play like we're doing a show, because that's what I wanted it to sound like. So
Yeah.
we just played every song bump 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 right down the line, and put it on Pro Tools, because it has Apache and Point Panic and See Me Low, Surf Beat, Surfin' Bird by my
Yeah.
drummer's son. He's a great singer. And then Mr. Rebel, which is a song nobody knows, but it's a great song. And then Sleepwalk and Miserlou. So those are some of the songs on here. So this is what we do. This is what we sound like. So it's all about recreating, how great the Surfaris were and keeping that memory alive. So that's what I'm doing.
I love that you mentioned Sleepwalk, because I like talking
Yeah,
about that song as much as possible. That was my wedding song, the Santo and Johnny version.
exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah, the
it's
Santo and Johnny version is, my son Devin plays lead on that on the record, and he does an awesome interpretation of it. And we've had people from all over the world comment about how great that version of it is, and it's really true to the original version, except we weren't playing it on a steel guitar.
yeah. Yeah.
We're doing it on couple of Stratocasters. I was using my Jaguar on rhythm. Devin was playing lead on his Strat. So, but we're keeping that true.
Very cool. So I was reading up a little, and one of the things that was kind of it seemed like the foundation of your group was the beat. Was it the African drum beat that you wanted to incorporate? That was an important part of your sound.
Well, Ronnie, as far as Wipeout goes, Ronnie was a cadence marching drummer for Glendora and Charter Oak high schools. And so Ronnie started playing a beat that excuse me, he started making this up, and it was just spontaneous because Ronnie was a creative. He created his own original marching drum beat. And I said, well, we better put some chords and a melody and a bass line, or it'll be a drum solo like Sandy Nelson, because that's the kind of drummer Ronnie was. He would take over the show. He was the Surfaris. Let me put it this way: the Surfaris had what was called lead drums. I mean, the lead guitar was there, but as far as Ronnie's mind going, it was his band, and he was going to lead it, because he played louder than anybody. He played huge sticks and would sit up in the middle of the stage in the front, and just beat the heck out of them all night long. And there were times when we would do a 4-hour concert, or it was a dance. We would put our guitars down, leave the stage. He'd stay out there and play 15-minute drum solo.
Wow.
All by himself. And then when we finally come back on the stage, we'd say, hit it, surf beat. He'd start over again, So he'd be part of the show continually. In fact, I don't know if you did the research or not, but Ronnie has a 104-hour drum solo that he did in 1965. in Sacramento,
Wow.
California.
How
Yeah, it's like a Guinness World Record.
how do you prepare for something like that?
Well, Ronnie was one of those kind of guys who just was headstrong and would just do it. It wouldn't, there's nothing to prepare. You just set him up with a drum set on the stage, turn on the lights, and he would go. And even when he had to go to the bathroom, he'd take a drum bell with him, like a cowbell. He had to keep clicking the cowbell and then go back out on stage and keep playing. He couldn't stop the beat. Or he'd take a tambourine with him. But for
Yeah.
104 hours, then when he finished that, we had a concert to do after that. And so he had to play another 4 hours as an actual drummer, not just keeping a beat, for 104 hours. So he was really an Iron Man in that way, short, stocky, just tenacious as heck, really strong personality.
So that's very cool. Um, one of the things that I find a lot of surf bands in the 60s did very, very long sets or multiple sets. And being that young, without amassing your own catalog, how did you choose the songs that you were going to cover instrumentally, and what was your inspiration to do that?
Well, what happened is I got a call on a Saturday in September of 1962 from Pat Conley and Jim Fuller. And they said, "Hey, Bob, can we come over and practice?" I said, "Sure." So they came over to my house, and in my house, my dad had set up a room, and the room has amplifiers and music stands and tape recorders and all of that. So I had a studio back in that primitive era, and they came over, and basically I was a big fan of the Ventures. So
Yeah.
I had all the Ventures albums to that point. And so I played Walk, Don't Run and Perfidia and those kind of things. So so we sat around, I played every lead I knew on the Ventures. And Jim Fuller had the Surfer's Choice album by Dick Dale. And he knew every song on Dick Dale's Surfer Choice album. So between the two albums, the Walk Don't Run album and the Surfer's Choice album, we had enough songs to play for a sock hop. So
Yeah.
we got finished rehearsing those songs. And then Pat Conley goes, "Hey, Bob, I've got a gig for us tonight." I said, "What?" He says, "Yeah, at Pomona Catholic High School. After a football game, there's a sock hop in the gym, and we're going to play for that." And I go, "That's cool, but we don't have a drummer." And then Pat goes, "We're going to meet the drummer there." You imagine you're going to play your first concert and you don't know the drummer. He doesn't know you. Fortunately, Ronnie was an excellent mimic. He could pick anything up and make it work. And so, yeah, I showed up. We put all of the equipment that I own. Now, Pat Conley and Jim Fuller had one little Champ amp, and Fuller had a studio Sonic, or just he had a Sonic. It was a Fender student model. The studio model, just a real simple little guy. And Fuller and Pat didn't have a bass guitar. So Pat plays my Telecaster with 2-finger chords sliding up and down the neck, just playing with a pick. That's all he knows. He doesn't know anything else. Fuller has showed him 1-5. That's all you got to hold. You can find it anywhere that we play. It's down there. And so we throw I had a Bandmaster with 2 12-inch speakers, right? And 4 plugins. And so we all 3 plugged into that amp, took that out there. We took Ronnie's drums were a Ludwig set. Excuse me, that he owned. So we show up at this in the afternoon, and in the gym, they're putting crepe paper on the walls for the sock hop after the football game, right?
Yeah.
And so, and underneath the net is Ronnie setting up his drums flat on the floor. No stage, no PA, nothing, just him. So I bring my amp in, we set up, and Fuller plugged into my amp. Pat plugged into this little Champ amp, and that couldn't even hear it over the drum. So he plugs into there. So we got 3 guitars and a drum, and we played every song we knew. I played all my Venture songs. Fuller played all of his Dick Dale songs. So that's how we started the nucleus of our song. Now, what happened is then we got to Dick Dale Smallin, and he said, "Boys, you need enough songs for a 4-hour dance." So we added another 75 songs. We had about 25 songs done. And so what we would do is I listened to every record I could find. I'd heard a lot of bands like the Tornadoes and Torquay and, all the stuff, all the instrumentals that had been on the radio. And so we just sat down and woodshedded every song we could put together. And by March of 63, we had over 100 songs that we could play in one night. And you
Wow.
needed to, because you started a dance at 8 o'clock. You played a set, took a little break, played another set. You played 4 sets, so 8 to midnight, and we never repeated a song. So Ronnie would throw in, like, he hadn't written Surfer Joe yet, but he would do like Lovey Dovey and a few doo-wop songs, because Ronnie
Yeah.
was kind of campy, and he didn't sing any Beach Boys songs, but he sang all the 50s things that were easy, like Cherry Pie, and a few things that he wanted to do. And we didn't have a PA, okay? And when we finally played in a place that had a PA, guess what it was? It was the basketball announcer microphone, one of those crystal mics with a little off to the side was a little amplifier with one knob that you turned on. The speakers were up in the ceiling to announce the PA,
Yeah.
for the basketball games. That's all we had. So we played loud as heck because Ronnie was loud. Our amps. Well, eventually Pat bought a bassman to use bass, and Fuller
Yeah.
bought another bandmaster. So we had those three. And then when we blew out that, we switched to upgraded to Showmans, single Showmans. And then when we blew those out, moved up to double Showmans. And Ronnie kept adding drums and getting new sets as we went along. But when we first recorded Wipeout, we only had my bandmaster. And the very night we recorded Wipeout, Pat shows up with a bass guitar. Never played bass before in his life. He brought a bass guitar. I said, "Where'd you get that, Pat?" "Oh, I borrowed it from my cousin." So he's playing bass for the very first time on Wipeout. I mean, Pat was very talented, no doubt about it. Great ear, could sing harmony and things like that. So he was a great musician in the primary side. Just surf bass is down, 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 down. That's all you needed to do. But he had a bandmaster. He bought a bandmaster amp, and so, or a basement amp rather. So we basically started very, very fundamentally cheap, as it were.
So it sounds like to me that once you got the ball rolling, it was like a roller coaster. It just kept going. It wouldn't stop.
Oh yeah, I mean, we recorded Wipeout December of 62. By March of 63, it was starting to get on the radio, and we were starting to get some action, because what happened is that after we recorded Wipeout in Dale's studio, a guy named George Hoka came to the studio. He was a rep for Merit Distributing Company out of Los Angeles. Well, he grabbed the record, took it to Los Angeles, and guess who's sitting at the desk? Richard Delvey in Merit Distributing Company. That was his job. He was sitting at a desk, and George brings in the song and says, "Hey, check out Wipeout. I think it's a hit." So he plays it, and he goes, "Yeah, that's a hit record." He calls John Mariscalco, who had Princess Records, who was a good friend of Richard Delvey's, and Richard, they got together and said, "Yeah, that's a hit record." And so in March 23rd of 1963, Richard Delvey and John Mariscalco come to my house. And the first question out of their mouth was, "How many songs do you have in your repertoire?" Well, first of all, we didn't know what the word repertoire meant. And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" "Well, how many songs do you have?" I said, "Well, we have about 100. And what was amazing is that from the very first day I met him until he died, he never came, either one of them ever came to a concert in all of those years to hear what we sounded like. And that's where the whole problem started, is that they didn't believe that we as 15-year-olds could record an album. So they did it for us, and of course we were dumb. We didn't know what we were signing. So when we signed those contracts, they just, gave us a couple $100 or whatever it was. And they were on their way. And it was so funny. It was during sitting at in my mom's living room on these chartreuse couches my mom had. Delvey was talking to us, trying to convince us to sign these contracts, right? Well, John Mariscalco was really getting nervous, his stomach started hurting. It was so nervous, right? And he yells it to Delvey, where's my Milltowns? Well, Milltowns are an antacid, right?
Yeah.
And so I asked that of John Mariscalco, 50 years later. I said, do you remember that? He says, no, I don't remember it. Well, I remembered it, but he didn't. So it was okay. But anyway, what happened was, as we signed those contracts, they took it to LA. They took it to Art LeBeau, I think I mentioned already. And Art LeBeau passed on it. He didn't like it. So we wanted to get it on Princess. Well, that was John Mariscalco's label, which was fine, but it was a small time label. You weren't going to get any national distribution, just a local label in LA. And that was fine, but that wasn't going to get us on the radio. So what happened? How did Wipeout get on the radio? I think that's a good question.
Yeah.
Well, it takes a village, someone once said. Here is John Mariscalco, the publisher of Robin Hood Music, sitting in a restaurant in Hollywood with some buddies. They're sitting there, and this waitress comes up, and she says to them, hey guys, what do you do? Like anybody else trying to get out of being a waitress. What do you guys do? Oh, we're record producers. Well, she says, can I go over to your house and you can play some records for me? She's trying to get her thing going. And she comes over and she says, in John Mariscalco's house, play me some of your records. He plays Wipeout for her. And she says, you know what? I know a guy in Fresno, California. His name's Johnny Hyde, and he plays a midnight make it or break it show on KYNO. I will mail this record to him and he will put it on the radio because I told him to do it. And she says, and he said, okay. She mails it from Hollywood to Fresno. Now that's about 150 miles north of LA, right?
Yep.
He gets it on the midnight show. And by Thursday, it's the most requested song of the week. Well, guess what happens the next day on Friday? Randy Wood from Dot Records and his associate call Johnny Hyde and say, Johnny, do you have any new records this week? He says, yes, I have Wipeout. Cool, mail it to me. He mails it back to Hollywood, right? It arrives, gets on Randy Wood's desk. He opens it up, plays the record and goes, that's a hit record. Sign those guys. So immediately, I mean, it's on a Friday or so. Anyway, we get a call and boys, you need to meet Dot Records and sign contracts. So we met down there and Randy starts putting Wipeout and Surfer Joe on a 45. So we have a Dot 45. Now that's around April or so of 63. Well, in June of 63, it's on LA radio. And by September, it's on German radio, Australian radio, Japanese radio, all the radio stations around the world. And by November of 63, we're going to Hawaii first class to play at the Blaisdell Arena in Honolulu with the Crystals, Bobby Vinton, and Eddie Hodges. So here we are. Suddenly we're this, pop group that's world famous. And that's only from March to November of 63, right in that time frame. So kind of a whirlwind tour. Yeah,
absolutely. What was it like being in I know you're not strictly an instrumental band because you have vocals on Surfer Joe and others, but
exactly.
But what is like your contemporaries, the Ventures, Dick Dale? What was it like when they acknowledged, hey, these guys are really good at what they do?
Well, what happened is in 1970, was it 1980, I believe it was. Yeah, 1980. We went to a club in North Hollywood. I think it was El Camino or El Camino Club or something like that. And we were going to play with the Ventures there. And we're backstage with Mel Taylor, Bob Bogle, Don Wilson, all the guys of the Ventures, right? And we're standing in the room talking, and Mel stops everybody and goes, Bob, I want to thank you guys for writing and recording Wipeout. It extended our career 10 years.
Wow.
Because if you ever listen to a show by the Ventures, Wipeout is their finale song. And
Oh,
Mel Taylor gets out on his drums and plays Wipeout with sticks on the bass guitar. So Bob Bogle's standing there with a bass guitar. Mel comes up and goes, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. You know, halfway through the song, he stops and does this. And that's part of their finale for their whole show. So they recognized us. Same with Dick Dale. Dick Dale, we played with him many times. We did some things in San Clemente and things with him. And he acknowledged that, we thought he was the king of surf guitar, which he was our idol. And in fact, that's how we really got the band going, is watching him play down in Newport Beach and at the Rendezvous. And that's where we discovered the reverb box. We didn't even know it existed until he showed us. This was in 62, like the summer of 62. He was doing concerts. So we discovered that box, and I went out and bought one, that kind of thing. So it was kind of like the Ventures, the Surfaris, and Dick Dale are sort of, that's like the crowning triune god of surf music right there. Those three bands actually are surf music. Everything after that is basically, copying what we did. So that's how it is. It's like Little Richard thinks him and Chuck Berry created rock and roll, and everything is after that is just a copy of what they did, because they were, might say, they were perfect in what they did. So they're kind of like the crown of rock and roll. And the Ventures, Surfaris, although the Ventures were not a surf band, they've always been an instrumental band, but they were thrown into it. And you got the Tornadoes, you got a few other bands that were really hot at the time, and we were right there with them. So we were just you can hear it on our Surfaris Play album, which looks like this one. Let me get a picture. This one here. This has got, the five of us on it. And this is really what the Surfaris sounded like when we all bought new equipment. If you notice, Pat's got a real bass guitar there. And then that's me in the middle side. And then Ron Wilson has a new set of drums. Fuller finally gets a Stratocaster, and Jim Pash had a Selmer guitar. So that's, and some people say, well, you sound so different from this album. Even Wipeout sounds different. Because we re-recorded it on here. That's because we got all new equipment. How are you going to sound like you did with a guy that doesn't know how to play bass and doesn't even have a bass amp that he played bass, plugged it direct into the board anyway. So, stuff like that. We evolved quickly.
That bass looks like a Mustang bass with the thumb piece.
No, it's precision.
Is it a P bass?
It's an early precision bass.
Yeah.
It was at the same Fiesta Red. See, Fuller and he went to this Harris Music Company out in Pomona and bought these guitars, because that was sort of the Guitar Center of back then. They got those, and Ronnie got his drums there as well. He sponsored us on different tours we went on as well.
Excellent. Well, one thing I wanted to mention now, Devin plays with you. Did you say Robbie, your son?
Joel's my son. Yeah, Joel Berryhill plays drums.
So you have your whole family playing the Surfaris now.
Exactly. Well, you got to realize that my two sons were born into surf music.
Yeah.
They would sit around and play albums in our house when they're just babies. And, the 8-tracks, 4-tracks came out in those days, and I would have it in the car. And I gave Devin an old standard guitar that I got in Mexico, one of those Tijuana specials to start strumming on. And he started learning on that. And then Joel and Devin both played in junior high marching bands. And as they grew up through the music, Devin had his own surf band in junior high. Joel started playing drums in junior high, the marching bands. And I really love the marching band discipline, because it keeps you in constant time. You can't march out of time, So it was really good training for them to be part of that. And so, what happened was, as you replace members of the band, I had several guys play rhythm and drums for me over the years. And then when in 2000, Devin and Joel both said they wanted to be in the band permanently. Devin and Joel had played, Joel would come up and sing Surfer Joe, and then go out and do sound for us. Devin would come in when he was in town and play guitar with us and back and forth. And they said, well, Dad, we want to be in the band. So in 2000, so they've been playing with me 22 years now.
Wow. And
Yeah. Well, it's great because many of the guys say, well, you realize, like I was watching the Hank Garland story on Prime the other night, and it's kind of like you have to get along with these guys. You know, I mean, all the bands that have people in there that are really jerks, hard to get along with.
yeah,
Well, my sons and my wife, we all get along really well. You know, we grew up together, you might say, because I had Devin when I was 20. So, you know, Devin and my wife was only 19. So we basically were just kids when we had a baby. And then we had Joel, 6 years later. And so they've all grown up in the music business because I do publishing along with the band, and they've always been around it. So, and they love to do it. They love to be in music. And I, as a father, am so proud to have my two sons and my wife with me. I know that Linda McCartney got a bad rap for destroying the Beatles, or Ono, whatever her name was, destroying the Beatles, but my wife has always been a major contributor. In fact, she was a model, runway model in the 60s in Hollywood. So she was always really aware of the business. And so we've been up, like you say, with your wife. My wife is my partner. We have a music called Salt Talk Records, Salt Talk Music, and we're partners in that because it's kind of like you have to love what you do, and we do. So we love it together, all the aches and pains and the good and the bad and the ugly and the great, like being on stage. I was just, again, so proud every time my sons come out and play with me. I just can't stop smiling. People say, you look like you're having a good time. Well, what is there not to like, when you got your kids right there in the band with you and your wife? I mean, you've got the people you love and people love you, and that love comes across on the stage. So when we do a Surfaris show, people always comment, because we sell t-shirts and CDs after the show, and people will stand in line for an hour to get autographs of the band, and they'll go, this is so awesome, you have your family. I go, I know, but it hasn't been easy because the rock and roll world hates siblings in a band with their dads. And the wife is the worst thing, to be in a band with you. But I've always persevered and said, no, she's going to be with me. And people come up on stage and go, hey, Bob, if you ever need a real bass player, let me know. Oh. I'm going, well, I have one. I don't need another one. I mean, people are really bash you for doing this kind of thing, but it's okay. I mean, I love it because when we're up there playing the music that I love to play, Devin loves it, Joel loves it, my wife loves it, and we share that with the audience. And so that's what's great about the Surfaris, is that we're a family and we love doing what we do, and we love the fans, and it comes back in the praise and just the love. It's there.
And that brings everything full circle, because you're doing for your kids what your parents did for you. And
exactly, and
that's good parenting. It's all about family, and that's a strong power when you have that support.
It is. It's so warming and heartfelt when you have the support of your family behind you. That's not well, gosh, he's playing guitar, why don't you become an accountant? Or something. And I did take accounting because my mom wanted me to be an accountant. But anyway, she knew that I needed the business knowledge. So taking accounting was a good thing for me to do. But, it's kind of like I have 4 granddaughters, right? Well, the 21-year-old is a bass player. And the 13, one of the 13-year-olds is a Barry sax player in the marching band in junior high. So I got 2 musicians coming up, and the other one is a great singer. She plays with Devin and the Tourmaliners at times. That's Grace. So I have Jane as a bass player. Grace is a singer and artist. Faith is is a saxophonist, and then Selah is a singer. So I'm trying to bring them up into it as well, because somebody's got to replace me sometime.
That's awesome. One of the things, when you and I first corresponded, the first thing I did was call my uncle, because in the 60s, he used to play Wipeout in high school, and he used to play the Ventures, Dick Dale, uh,
Mhm.
all of them. And I said,
Right.
hey, I said, is there anything you want me to ask Bob? Because, I'm interviewing him. And he's like, get the hell out of here. I said, no, I'm really
Yeah.
good at it. I said, I'm just as surprised as you. And he just wanted to know about the gear. That's all he wanted to know about,
Yeah.
because he's a
Okay.
guitar player. And
Yeah.
well, like, while he's a Gibson guy now, he had a Jaguar then. So I wanted to
Sure.
ask you about that.
Okay. Well, my first, I'd say, official instrument was an ukulele that I bought in Hawaii when I was 13. And then my dad had a 1950 Silvertone acoustic guitar or standard guitar, steel strung, that I played when I was taking my first lessons. And then after playing for about a year on that, I said, Dad, I need an electric guitar. And we had a really good friend of my dad's who was also a country player, like Merle Travis and those kinds of guys, real melodic finger picking and stuff. He had a Fender Telecaster, must have been a 50s model, blonde neck with a little blonde Fender amp. And I said to Walter, his name was Walter Crabtree. I said, Walter, I want one of those, just like yours. So he said, okay, I'll find it. So he had a lot of friends that had used equipment. He went out and brought one over and said, Bob, here's a little amp, a little 8-inch speaker, Fender, a blonde Fender, Tremolex or whatever it was called originally, and a about a 56 Telecaster. It was beautiful. And when I first time I played it, I couldn't believe the strings were on the neck. That Silvertone was, that far off the neck. So
Yeah.
I was playing that, I'm going, oh, this is heaven. So he played a few tunes with me and showed me some Chet Atkins licks and things like that. So my first guitar was that 56 Telly, and then I had that. And then in 61, I wanted to get something more, and Fender had come out with the Jazzmaster. So I bought a 61 brand new Sunburst Jazzmaster, which I loved. And that's what I recorded Wipeout with, was that particular guitar. So I did the rhythm guitar on that guitar for Wipeout. And then Fuller had a dual sonic, Fender dual sonic, which was the student Mustang that they have today. It's the dual sonic, the original one. In fact, they just came out with that again, the dual sonic, and it was kind of cool. But I threatened to get one of those to play Wipeout on, because that's what Fuller had. That maybe I'm getting a custom Telecaster. I'm rebuilding from scratch and putting a new neck on it. It's going to look like a 50s Tele when I get done with it, but it's going to have a Bixby tremolo on it. So I had those two guitars, and then like I say, Jim Fuller, and then Pat Conley had a Harmony bass. I think Harmony was made by Sears or one of
Yeah.
those, a hollow body. And that's the picture. If you look on the back of the Wipeout album here, I'll show you. Okay, here's the original equipment we did Wipeout with. You can see it. Can you see it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, there's a Harmony bass, the dual sonic. Let's say Fuller had bought a Stratocaster by then, and then there's my Jazzmaster that I did Wipeout on. But that was the second guitar for Fuller. Then Pash had his original sax, but that was the Harmony bass that Pat played for the first night. He kept that. Now this was in the summer, so he kept that guitar from roughly December of 60 through until into July, before he bought his own Fender bass. And then in September, this was our equipment in September. You can see the two Fenders. Ronnie's got the chrome snare with blood on it, because he had bled his fingers playing that 104-hour drum solo. He had scar, blisters on his fingers from that. He had wiped the blood on it. And then I still had my Jaguar, my Jazzmaster. And then what happened is that, okay, now we're in, let's say in January of 1964. We've already toured Hawaii. We've toured around in Southern California, played a lot of concerts. Well, we got a call from one of the talent agencies out of New York, and they said, we want to send you guys to Australia with the Beach Boys, Roy Orbison, and Paul and Paula as the package. And originally it was going to be Chubby Checker on there, but they didn't let blacks in Australia in '64. They had a little apartheid thing going on, so he couldn't come. They wouldn't let him go. But anyway, this tour put together a package, and we had a backup band called, and the backup band that backed up Roy Orbison and Paula Paula was the Joy Boys. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard Australian surf music. It's very fast. And we had a song called Murphy the Surfy that we recorded, if you ever get to hear that. That's a song written by Norm Day of the Joy Boys, Murphy the Surfy. That's how we got that song. So what happened is that the Joy Boys were there. They're playing, backing up Roy and the other acts that needed it. We would play the five of us. The Beach Boys would play on their own, because that's when the Beach Boys were the Beach Boys. Okay.
Yeah.
You had, Brian on bass, Dennis on drums, Al and Carl, they were all there, and David Marks was not in the band at that time. So you had Brian and Carl and Dennis and the guys. So the four, they would all play, and then we would go on. And then what happened is that we played 31 shows together. Okay. And I would sit in the audience and watch Roy Orbison every night. Yeah. This is before he had Pretty Woman, okay? But he had all his other songs, Laura and all of those songs. He was just an awesome guy. In fact, he would sit in the dressing room warming up using my standard guitar that I had brought on the gig, and he actually signed it, his name, Roy Orbison, and with a big rough knife, had him put his scrawl on there, which was cool. So I had that guitar. But what happened is that we had played 31 shows, and at the end of the tour, we had an autograph night where all of us were in the back green room sitting around signing the brochures. They had made a brochure with all our pictures, and we were signing them, and Carl and Brian and everybody was signing. And I'm sitting there signing there, and Norm Day, the lead guitar player for the Joy Boys, comes over to me and says, "Hey, Bob, we have a hard time getting Fender instruments in Australia because of copyrights and patent infringements. Could I trade you my Jansen guitar made in Auckland, New Zealand, for your Jazzmaster that I recorded Wipeout on?" Well, in 1964, you're not thinking that it's going to be worth something. And so I said, "Sure, that sounds great." I get like a souvenir from the tour, right? Yeah. And so he opens up his cardboard case. That's how cheap things were, and puts my Jazzmaster in that. I opened up my Jazzmaster case, which I still have, and put his Jansen guitar in there, closed the cases, and we went our separate ways. So next day I'm flying back to America. I landed in Los Angeles, and we opened the cases because customs wants to see what you're bringing in. Right. Well, the Jansen was made, it says right on there, Auckland, New Zealand. I said, "Well, I borrowed this from a guy." "Oh, okay." And we gave him some records, and they looked at Jim Selmer's sax and said, "Hey, that's from Germany. You sure you didn't buy that in Germany and trying to avoid customs?" I said, "No, we just went to Australia. They don't have Selmer. We didn't go to Germany." "Oh, okay." So he got through, and Ronnie's drums were Ludwig. Fortunately, they were German, but he also had to get, the trustee, the custom guys were very strict on people traveling with equipment. So from then on, we always had receipts with us so that we could show them, the customs guys. But anyway, so my Jazzmaster, unfortunately, Norman Day got it, and he passed away a few years back, so I don't know where the guitar went to, but that's always the question I have is, "Where's your Jazzmaster?" I said, "Well, last I know, it's in Australia." So that was those things. So that was my Jazzmaster. So when I came back in February of '64, the opportunity was there for me to buy a new guitar. So we had become sponsored by Fender guitars. So I went to Fullerton, where Leo Fender was, and I said, "I need a new Jaguar." And so off the line comes this shiny candy apple red Jaguar. And he grabs it, hands it to me. I start playing it. I go, "Hey, I love it. Thanks." So I got a Jaguar. and got a new reverb unit as well because I reverb unit was getting tired, and we got the bigger amps. We had to pay for those, but anyway, we got everything squared around and hauled it all home. And so that was my next guitar, was a Jaguar, 64 Jaguar Candy Apple Red. And then, so those two guitars, or three guitars, basically, I had my Telecaster, which Jim Pash bought. He bought my original 56 Tele because Jim Pash wanted to learn how to play guitar. And so I taught him how to play guitar, and he used my Telecaster. Now, he was supposed to give that back to me rather than selling it, but he sold it to Richie Podler, who was a producer in LA, did a lot of songs in these, and he sold it to him without me knowing it. And so I lost that one. So my Jaguar and my Jazzmaster and my Tele are out of my control, but I've replaced the guitars now. I've got a Stratocaster custom shop Stratocaster. I have a Japanese Jazzmaster, which I've customized. Everything, the pickup is original and the neck, but I put new frets in it, and I had to put a new bridge and a new nut and that kind of thing to make it really nice. So I've got that we use today. And then I have a 50th anniversary 64 anniversary Jaguar Candy Apple Red that I play today. That's sort of my main axe. And then my wife has a precision bass, and that works. And then what else I got? Okay. And I've got a GNL. Remember the GNL, the George Littlefinger? Yeah, I went and bought an 1981 GNL F100, which I played for a lot of years. That's hanging on the wall. I think it's over there. There they are.
Oh, wow.
Hanging on the wall back there.
And there's
my
the
GNL
ukulele.
and my ukulele. Yeah, that's my original ukulele.
Really?
And actually, yeah, that's my original one, and my wife's original one, both from Hawaii. So I've got two ukuleles, and then I've got a new Kamaka ukulele. It's not Kamaka. Sorry, let me get the name of it. Here's my current one. It's a Koaloa ukulele.
Wow.
Beautiful. I mean, it's one of the. It's a beautiful tone ukulele that I was sponsored by when we played Hawaii. Well, what happened there, if you want to hear another story, we've been to Hawaii many times to play. Well, there's a guy named George. His name is Sakuma, George Sakuma. He plays. He's an ukulele teacher. He has over 3,000 students, right? Well, once a year in July, he has a big orchestra concert with all of these students playing at the Queen's Big Round Theater there on Waikiki Beach. And he called me and said, Bob, we want to play Wipeout, and we want you to come and play Wipeout with the students. So I went all the way to Hawaii and played Wipeout with my guitar. And at the end of it, the company that makes this ukulele gave me this as a prize for coming over to Hawaii. So I've got this beautiful ukulele now that I use from time to time on songs. We're doing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I got that recorded, so we do that. So Wipeout's been very, very good to me. What can I say?
And to the rest of us too. To the rest.
Oh, yeah, it's an iconic part of the culture. And because every time, like, we've played with Frankie Avalon. Frankie Avalon is on tour, and we played with him one night, and Wipeout is in his set. He plays his beach party movies with a net behind him on screen, and they play Wipeout as a soundtrack to it. So, every time somebody wants to do something California surf beach, Wipeout is the repertoire you got to play. So, even the Masked Singer TV show, they just paid us to use Wipeout on that this season. So one of the nights they had a beach party thing where they threw beach party balls around. Got permission to do that. So it just keeps getting re-upped, and it's just awesome.
One of the things I was curious about, since I was very young, I was a Beach Boys fan. But then in the 80s, I was also a Surfaris fan and Ventures.
Mhm.
The whole surf sound, the California sound, I love. But the
Mhm.
Beach Boys did that song. I think it was with the Fat Boys. They did Wipeout.
Oh
Now,
yeah,
now
yeah.
how did that feel to see and hear that?
Well, we were playing pretty regularly then, and K Rock with Rodney on the Rock and those kind of things in L.A.
Yeah,
They were
yeah,
playing Wipeout. Well, one of the rap groups, the Fat Boys, decided to put words to Wipeout.
yeah,
And so we got a call from my publisher, Richard Delvey and John Maniscalco, and said, "Hey, this group wants to do it. And guess who's going to back them up?" I said, "The Beach Boys." I go, "Yes, the Beach Boys." I go, "Oh my gosh." He should have had us back him up, but it was a
yeah,
vocal. So they wanted a vocal group. And so, yeah. And we signed the contracts. We get 75% of the royalties on that because Wipeout is the song they're singing, and they
yeah,
get 25% for doing the words. So fundamental, we got three. I have a triple platinum album on my wall from the Fat Boys, and when
wow,
so it's one of those things where it's been real beneficial to have other people record your songs. It's like Wipeout is. I have like 8 gold and platinum albums from other people recording my song and putting it on their album. So you can't beat that, when people love your music that much to record it and then send you a gold record. It's incredible.
yeah. And you know what is the biggest compliment is um copying or covering another band. Like imitation is the best form of flattery. Or I'm
Right.
sorry. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I meant to say. Um, and I know growing up being in bands and knowing other bands, my band played Wipeout
Yeah.
at the high school dance, and we were a metal band.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
it's
Herman the German plays Wipeout in Germany, and he was from the rock band in Germany. He was the drummer for I can't think of the name of the band suddenly. Big famous band in Germany that had a lot of hit records, and he has his own version of Wipeout on stage. So heavy metal bands play Wipeout as well.
yeah,
Even country bands will play it. So it isn't. It's not genre specific to anybody. It gets
yeah.
used by everybody.
It translates very well into other genres, and that's one thing I love about surf music so much
Yeah.
is that you surf musicians can turn any genre of music into surf music, and surf music can always be like the rhythm of metal
Mhm.
music. The
Yeah.
rhythm is very close to the rhythm that you guys were playing.
Oh yeah, I mean it's high energy. I mean it's showy. Surf music. Most time people think of surf music as elevator music, or I
No,
don't want to hear surf music. It's
no, no,
not
no.
any good. But when you hear it done by Led Zeppelin, or
Yeah,
somebody like that that's doing it, you realize that it's a in other words, Wipeout is a song that covers all the genres. There isn't anybody who won't play it. I mean, Vince Gill even plays it. I mean,
yeah,
here in Nashville. So I mean, everybody's playing the song, and you realize that it makes when in 19 well go back to 1990. I did a parade in Seal Beach, which was my town we were living in at the time. I got a truck, I put it on a flatbed, put the band on it. We played up and down the street because that's what the trade. And every time I would come to a new block, I'd be playing Wipeout. I must have did it 20 times. People would stand up and cheer and start dancing. So it's a song that makes people happy when they hear it. They love it. They want to dance. They want to stand up. They want to move. And that's the kind of music I play throughout the whole evening when we do our concert. And that's why people love what we do. And like I say, it's what's interesting about it. It's hard to sell a surf band in Nashville, but we're going to go do it, in March 9th at 6 o'clock, 6 to 8 o'clock in this club. And they're going to love it, even though they don't even know what it is. Because what's interesting is that I've played a lot of concerts where the promoter will come up after the show and go, "Wow, if I'd have known you guys were that good, I'd have done a better job of promoting you. Stuff like that. I mean, it's kind of like, how can you have a band for 60 years and people not know you? But
Yeah,
it is. That's the way
yeah,
it is. I'm going to be playing in Nashville. There'll be people in there who won't have any idea who we are until we play the music. And they'll go, man, I thought my brother wrote that, or something like that, because everybody and their brother claims to have written Wipeout, and every band plays it, and people say, oh, yeah, the Beach Boys wrote that, didn't they? I get that as well. So there's bands that play it. In fact, I went on and looked at BMI, who keeps track of songs.
yeah.
It's been re-recorded over 1,000 times,
Oh my
and they keep
God.
track of it. And I've got my BMI thing is about 3/4 of an inch thick of paper of how many times it's played. Although you only get 0.003 cents a copy,
Yeah,
it does get played millions of times. So works
yeah.
out good.
That's so great. I want to thank you so much, Bob.
Sure.
It was a big part of my youth. Surf music was a big part of my youth, and my family's, my two uncles played together in a surf band, and it's very near and dear to my heart, Wipeout, and even Surfer Joe, because of the B-side.
Sure.
And I was very nervous to talk to you today, but you made me feel very comfortable and at ease. And I appreciate you taking your time and being so kind to me.
Well, thank you so much for the interview, and hope to see you at one of our concerts.
I would love that.
Bring your uncles.
Oh, he would love that. He would love that.
Yeah. Well, we're starting to put some tours together, and like I say, go to thesurfaris.com is our website. You can look, or on the Surfaris Facebook, to see where we're playing. But we're out there gigging and keeping it going, because I think it's music that needs to be played good and strongly and be out there. It's a legitimate, remember, it was created in Southern California, and it's a Southern California icon, and it needs to be preserved. And like jazz, it needs to be preserved, and we're doing that. So I'm hoping that people will come out and hear it and enjoy it as much as we do.
I know I will. If you come to Philadelphia, I'm gonna be there, and I'm gonna be the guy in the back going, "Hi, Bob. Hi, Bob. Thank you so much for."
There you go. Yeah, well, definitely. And we'd love to come to Philadelphia. So if you know any promoters that want to promote a surf band, like I say, we're playing with Eddie Angel of Low Straitjackets on this concert on the 9th. So we're trying to put together a package. I'm going to video it and try to make an EPK out of it.
Oh, nice.
So we could send it to promoters and said, here's a night of instrumental music with a few vocals thrown in for taste, to make a beautiful evening out of a 2-hour show. We played with the Ventures that way. It's a beautiful show. Even though we're both instrumental bands, we sound very much different, and the way we do it and the way they do it. So, it's a great show. So I'm looking forward to it.
And it's very, very cool that you and Eddie got together, because I interviewed him, and he doesn't care about like all the business and stuff like that. He's all about the music. Like let's go and play. And he was so down to earth, and since he was so kind to me, I'll support him in any way I can. So congratulations on your team effort there. His band is great. He's a great guy, and I love the Surfaris. Devin's a wonderful man, and I'm just so happy that you have a family behind you playing. I know if I was in a band and my family played with me, it would be the best feeling I'd ever have.
It is. It's awesome. I love it. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for talking to me, and hope things go well, and hope Pi Records travels the world, as they say.
That would be great. I would love that. Thank you so much, Bob.
Okay. All right. We'll see you later.
Okay.